I'm Jason, the creator of Team Rocket Robotics, and now that's a month and a half or so after Motor City Massacre 3, let's go ahead, return to Micro Flash Gamma and do a bit of an after-action report, kind of go over what worked, what doesn't, and give a little bit of a preview into what's going to be happening with the next version of this robot. So let's get started. So back at Motor City Massacre 3, I believe is what it was, back in April of 2019. That's down in Livonia, Michigan, where the event was held. I had 4 fights. There's 5 robots in the, I think there's 5 robots in the event. So we did a round robin, so 4 fights. There's going to be a lot of recurring themes in each of these fights, and it did take some pretty nice damage. Let me hold the robot up like this. You can kind of see how this A-frame here in the front kind of looks like it's been a bit drunk. Well, yeah, that's damage. Actually, it's a combination of damage and me fixing it. So why don't we take a little bit more in-depth look at what happened to the robot, and also at the time that I'm going to be publishing this video, the videos of the fights are going to be coming up on YouTube, so you can find a link to the Michigan Combat Robotics Association channel down in the description of this video, so where you can hopefully find the fights of Micro Flash Gamma. There are a few other videos out there I will link to as well from the other builders who have put stuff up. Alrighty, let's go get Micro Flash Gamma down on his handy dandy little stand right here, and shameless plug while I'm at it. I'll probably be having these little Beetleweight customizable stands available for sale, hopefully at the time this video is out. If so, you can find a link to where you can buy them down in the description of this video. Alright, so the first fight was against a kinetic kit called Skippy. So obviously it's a bit of a drum spinner, egg beater, however you want to describe it. And more or less what happened, and a bit of a reoccurring theme, was that the weapon failed. Again and again and again. Now this time it was something different. Last time around, the weapon blade itself was complete crap, and it basically got deformed, all sorts of stuff like that went wrong. With AR 500 steel, it took a heck of a lot of more damage. You can see there's still some little nicks and scratches along the edge here, but for the most part, the blade is still perfectly usable for a number of more fights. The main problem, though, was the drive belt. So I'll talk more about that later, but I'm getting back again off topic, aren't I? So the weapon failed pretty quickly into the fight, but the good news is this robot can take a heck of a lot of punishment, as that's for the most part, a bit of my reputation. So a lot of this damage that was done in the A-frame was Skippy. I got flipped over a few times, so that's why there's battle damage here on the top. Some of this damage to the sides of the wheel armor here, that's also from that robot. And in the end, I lost by a bit of a technicality. Now, for safety reasons, the decision was made at the event to not allow the pits for the 3-pound Beetleweight class. Skippy, due with the sheer force when he hit me, because of course, second law of Newton mechanics, you hit something, it equal force back in you. So when he hit me and throw him in the air, he would slam himself into the ground. That actually broke one of the pits. That force of himself hitting the ground broke the latch in the pit, so that kind of took that pit out of action. And then I lost because of the technicality, because at the very end, he threw me up into the air. I think I might have bounced off the ceiling. But that process caused the other pit to open up. He fell in the pit, and I'm pretty sure I fell in on top of him, technically being the second person in the pits. And, you know, in long story short, I can see the match at that point, though. I don't know what the technical rules are in that case in terms of how pits work. But regardless, since the pits weren't actually in play, I suppose whatever, blah, 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 rule technicality. That's why when you see people talk about this event and they mention on the other weight classes for the ant weights and fairy weights, there's no pits, that was kind of our fault. This wheel here was some of the damage. I don't know if this was Skippy or Snowfire, but they more or less did the same thing. They were able to remove one of these wheel armors, and you can see just kind of shoot up the wheel pretty good. So fight number 2 was against Snowfire. Now this is the second time I fought him. I fought him at the previous Motor City Massacre. He's also a custom built drum spinner, and this time he had a 6S battery, was handing out those little ear plug things. He said his weapon was really loud, and it was really, really loud. So you gotta give him credit there. In his first fight, it spun up, and for whatever reason, his robot just died. So going to the second fight, I'm like, well, this could work out well for me. Could be the key phrase there. But his robot is performing much better, and it became another big slog fest of combat. And unfortunately, reoccurring theme, I believe my weapon got into his spinner weapon and basically ripped off, or not ripped off, but it removed the drive belt. You can see the drive belt can come off pretty easily. There's a reason for that, which I'll explain later. So once again, I lost my weapon about 10 seconds into the fight. More or less very similar thing against with Skippy, with the other spinner, vertical spinner. He did some damage to the armor, did some damage to the frame. Somebody did that. I don't know who. That's going right through 1/8 inch. The frame there, it's almost cracked pretty good. I don't know who did that, but one of those two guys did. Also, he did take out a wheel very similar to this. I don't know, one of them actually just completely destroyed a wheel. I don't know who it was. I think this one was Skippy, and Snowfire is one who actually just really destroyed the wheel. But regardless, he also threw me in the ceiling a few times, all that fun stuff. Eventually, it turns out this drive belt here for the weapon is apparently a little bit thicker than the ground clearance of my robot, and I thought I got stuck on a bent frame, so I tapped out. But actually, it turned out to just be the drive belt, which is kind of annoying because I could have got out of that. But then again, I would have been throwing myself again and again into the robot. But you know, hey, I can do that pretty well. But that was like once again a loss. All right, let's go on to fight number 3. Now this was against Wedge of Allegiance. I beat him last time around, do some fancy driving, and I'm not entirely sure what happened here. My thought process is that I didn't fully turn on the robot going into the arena. Right back here in the back of the armor is the hole where you turn a little Allen key in, and it triggers one of the little I think it's the FingerTech Robotics switch, the thing everybody uses. And I don't think I fully engaged it. The robot turned up, it spun up, and I actually got a good solid hit with the weapon. And I took a chunk out of his armor. This is the first time I actually got hit on somebody. This weapon can do damage, trust me. I can show you some, I've showed damage before in the last video. But I took a chunk out of his armor, but then the drive belt and the weapon popped again. Once again, reoccurring theme. He ran me in the corner and my robot just died. That's why I'm thinking the power switch turned off, because I thought maybe I'd suffer some sort of electrical damage. I took it back to the table. Everything looked fine, nothing smelled bad, no magic smoke, none of that stuff. I took it back to the test box, turned it on, and everything worked. So I'm thinking the power just got turned off because the switch wasn't turned on all the way. What the frickin' do? So now here I am, 0-3, going against Phantom 2. So Phantom 2 he's won the event twice now. I think he won both Motor City Massacre 1, Motor City Massacre 2. And so I'm ready to face off against him. He beat me last time. I got pushed into the pits, but we had a pretty good slugfest last time where we took out each other's weapon systems and all that fun stuff. And well, one thing I have to change with Microflash Delta for sure, because I'm going to be fighting Phantom 2 again. Once again, my main drive pulley here for my weapon is at the exact height of his weapon. Now I knew that going into the fight. And my plan against him was relatively simple. Now, if I go head on, his weapon's got longer reach. But if I hit him from any other side, I outrange his weapon. I was actually checking this. The problem is the Motor City Massacre box is very claustrophobic. It's 8x4, and you don't realize how small that really is. And even though Phantom 2 is a relatively tiny robot, it's like the size of just like the body of his robot's like the size of like my little plastic part right here, and that's like it. Then he's got a big spinner bar. There really isn't a whole lot of maneuvering around him. He took out my weapon the first hit. At least this time it wasn't a drive belt failure. It actually was legitimate damage. But whatever that did, it jacked up his weapon pretty good, and he didn't get a whole lot of weapon power the rest of the match. He did manage to remove one of these wheel guards. That's some Phantom 2 damage right there. He also did that, so he took a chunk out of the wheel over here. So he did some damage to the robot, but the match went the full 3 minutes, and I will argue that I got screwed by the judges. He did do more damage, but not substantially. It was mostly cosmetic damage. My weapon was destroyed, which is the big hit. His weapon was more or less out of commission. It could kind of spin sometimes, but it wasn't enough to be effective. So he technically did have more damage in that regard, though he did have some drive issues. I actually backed off against him on multiple occasions thinking he was dead because his robot wasn't moving. However, I clearly dominated the match in terms of aggressiveness and control. It's very clear in the rules that aggressiveness is not sitting in the middle of the box spinning your weapon, which he did most of the time. I was constantly on the attack. I was constantly pushing him around far more than he was pushing me around. But regardless, I hate judges' decisions. That's why I build robots with big weapons, and I was really counting on the pits, which weren't in this competition, unfortunately. So I went 0-4, unfortunately, but I'm going to make some changes. We're going to make this robot better. I don't know exactly what the event I'm going to target next. I'm going to be at Motor City Massacre 4 in November for sure. But there may be one event in the summer I'm going to shoot for, but I got to get the robot ready for that. So let me talk a little bit about some of the recurring issues. So I mentioned, first of all, the drive belt is very, very loose. There is a good reason for that. If you saw episode 8 of the build report, you noticed that when I had the previous version of this motor in here, it was a 4S motor. What would happen is I'd provide throttle, but all it would do is it idle. With this one, even though I could throttle up the motor and the weapon fine, if the drive belt was just a little bit tighter than it is now, it would do that same kind of thing to where the motor would just idle. So I'm pretty sure what this comes down to is the speed controller just being very conservative, being a bunch of quadcopter parts, and it senses the fact that there's even a little bit of resistance because, your quadcopter might be in the ground. It's going to go ahead and put the motor in a state to where it probably can't damage itself. So I need to fix that, which either means trying a 4S battery in here, which I have plenty of battery capacity, so I can cut down the battery capacity a little bit and go with a 4S battery. Or, as the Phantom 2 guy was suggesting, I can actually do some software modifications to my ESC, which allows it to give it a much more stronger initial pulse, I guess the initial motor pulse to get the motor spinning, which I can, if I amp that up, I might be able to get over the issue of having the drive belt too tight. So those are two things I'm going to go in terms of that issue, trying to resolve that. There's some other structural changes too. The other recurring problem was these armor panels on the side of protective wheels kept getting removed. They weren't actually destroyed. These are the same armor panels I ran all 4 fights. They really don't have a lot of damage to them. The bottoms are chipped up, but that's about it. What the problem with them is this one here I intentionally did not fully reattach. They are held on with the type of screws that are kind of countersunk in there. I always forget their proper name. But they're the type of screws. They don't have a rounded top. They have like the angled, so they're not this type of screw. They're the ones that are countersunk in there. And it turns out, naturally, UHMW or any kind of plastic is a bit pliable. So just any good solid hit against this is really enough to pop those things off. So the screws stay in place. You can see it right there. That screw's in place. But pretty much the force hit to it caused the hole to expand and pop off the head of that screw. So I need to fix that. It's in the front here, it's pretty simple about making these different types of screws, but in the back it's a little bit trickier because right now they're attached in such a way to where they are behind the wheel, and these other type of screws might actually come in contact with the wheel and cause issues there, because it turns out the drive mounts that I have, let me open those up. Those are the 3D printed nylon mounted clamps. They worked decently well, but they weren't perfect. So they didn't completely hold the motors in place, and it was not terribly uncommon that at the end of the fight, the motors would be pushed in or pushed outward a little bit. Never enough to actually disable the robot, so the robot worked fine, but clearly enough that if it was a few more good solid hits, you could be dealing, with some drive issues. So I have to change that around, and I'm going to create a new version of the motor mounts that have screws that'll screw in and hold on to the front plate of the gearboxes, because there are spots in the front of the gearboxes to hold that in place. Plus, then by getting rid of the clamp that's over the motor, that's a step towards the eventual upgrade to brushless drive motors. That's not going to be this time around, but it'll be a step in that direction. So the other few things I'm going to be thinking of for a Delta, like I said, I may try to go for a 4S battery. Right now, here's my 3S battery crammed in back here. It's a little tight at the moment. But there's going to be some changes to the structure. It's going to be the same basic structure pieces. But what I'm going to be doing is getting rid of these little aluminum pieces that are the kind of the side supports there. You see there's one right there. And I'm going to try to go with some UHMW braces that'll hopefully reduce weight, give a little bit of rigidity, allow me to remove this piece of aluminum and some of these parts here, and that should, maybe, that might give me room for a 4S battery. I'm not 100% sure on that, but maybe. That's one thing, to save some weight and still get a decently strong frame. I need to move this frame bottom piece here inside the robot and make it so that it's easier to replace. The top part of the frame is not awful to replace, but the bottom part of the frame cannot be replaced within an hour. I tried, it just couldn't be. Which means that if this were to ever get destroyed, I'd basically be out of the competition, so that's got to be fixed. So what I'm going to do is bring that frame into the insides of the robot, and that's also the reason why I got to get rid of these pieces of the wrong size, so I can drop in a new frame if need be, and other fun things like that. And the last big thing is going to be to reverse how the motor sits in the robot. So right now it's on the base of the robot. I'm going to hang it downward, which will cause the drive pulley for the weapon to be somewhere down here below the weapon. Still keep the weapon at about the same height, which is good. And well, no matter what basically height you put that at, there's a risk of being destroyed by a robot. It's going to be a risk for someone other than Phantom 2, who I know I'm going to be fighting in the future. So it's more important that I'm able to fight him than some other unknown robot. And there's not a lot of undercutter spinners at that particular elevation. You're more likely to get someone who's trying to cut the very bottom of the robot, or someone's got a little bit higher up bar like Phantom 2. So I think that's going to be an overall better design. That's going to require me to flip the entire frame upside down, which then in turn is going to require new drive motor pods anyway, because there's a different shape to the aluminum frame on the top versus the bottom. All right, I think that kind of covers all the important stuff that happened back at Motor City Massacre 3. So once again, I'm Jason, the creator of Team Rock Robotics. Thank you guys all for watching this series here on how I built this Beetleweight combat robot. And yes, there will be another series here from Micro Flash Delta. That'll be coming out pretty soon in terms of build episodes. So go ahead and subscribe here to this YouTube channel to get those notifications when those videos are released. And I'm going to be starting that process of the design phase really, really soon. So thank you guys all for watching, and have a great week.